Welcome to the second episode of Finance in Flow. We're recording this live in Berlin at the Lucanet World. We have a lot of exciting topics here, but right now we'd like to talk a little bit more about AI. My name is Janis Steinmann. I'm the head of XBRL at Lucanet, and with me I have Sören Labrenz, who recently moved into the role of head of product AI here at Lucanet. So Sören, what does this role, this move entail for you, and why is it important for Lucanet to have a head of product specifically for AI?
I think personally, first of all, it's really exciting to be at the forefront of the technology that is coming seemingly out of nowhere. I think when we first encountered ChatGPT personally, it was quite surprising when it hit. And I think for us generally, it's a major shift into what we want to do with our products, how we are going to focus them going forward. And it's really exciting to see that Lucanet is willing to do these investments in AI, is pushing us forward as a product to do the changes that are necessary to prepare us and our products, our customers for truly the revolution that we are heading towards when we think about AI.
Yeah, they're really, really exciting times right now, and I also enjoy very much that at Lucanet we do get the time to spend on the AI topics, because it does take up a lot of time to stay on track with these developments, right? So I think GPT-4o was sort of like the major first model that we tried to use productively at Lucanet, and it feels like that's years ago, right? But it's, I think, quite accurately 1 year ago that 4o was released. Which blew our minds back in the day when we tried it. The first multimodal model where you can actually work with pictures and sound and everything. And then I think it was September the same year when the O1 model was released, which was the first reasoning model, so a model that can actually think. And then everything, for 3 months we were amazed by this 4o model, and then O1 was another milestone really that changed the way we had to look at how we work with these models. So the pace of how the landscape is evolving, not only the models itself, but also everything around it, is really, it's hard to keep up, right? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, we are quite close to it due to the fact that we are in R&D, but still being in that position, it feels often like science fiction and very far away, and we talk about a future which feels quite different to what we live on a day-to-day basis right now. But on the other hand, we are experiencing the changes already in the work we do and the ways of working we are applying. And the same is true for our products, where we are seeing more and more AI being part of the products itself. And likewise, that will impact the ways of working of finance teams. So yeah, really, really excited about these changes. I think there's also almost endless opportunities where AI can be applied. So for us in product, it's quite challenging to understand how to set the priorities, what to focus on first. So this is really where we need to discuss a lot also with our partners and customers. Where do we actually want to drive that towards? So what do you think? Where should we use AI in the finance teams?
I think, of course, the thing where we want to use this is to automate all the manual labor tasks, right? I mean, there's still, you can, of course, in the past, we tried to automate as much as possible using like set algorithms, right? But for some things, you really need this additional layer of intelligence. I think the XBRL tagger agent that we're developing in my team is a good example, because in order to automate this tagging process, the algorithm would need to understand the content of a report, and that was very hard to implement classically, right? Because all the reports are different. But now with AI, these models, they really do understand the content of IFRS, for example, or ESRS, and they can say, okay, yeah, this part of the report is probably the disclosure of goodwill, right? And they can assign like a confidence level as well, and then we can really use this technology to get away with these manual labor tasks. So I think that's really where we also want to focus on at Lucanet, right? Of course, we have some of these low-hanging fruits, like in disclosure management, we have these features where you can you can just generate a narrative, right? Generate a disclosure. Maybe you need some inspiration of how to write a disclosure of goodwill, for example. And you can, of course, use this functionality to generate these reports. You can change the tone from negative to positive. These are the low-hanging fruits that nonetheless are useful for our customers. But what we at Lucanet really want to focus on is creating value, right? To free up space in the mind of our customers so they can focus on the actual work, not the manual labor, right? But also, like, if we look, we have a few exciting use cases already, right? Like the XBRL tagger agent, but we can imagine so much more. And it's also these days that we not only, the models develop at a speed that sometimes it feels like, okay, we have this functionality, we need a little bit more accuracy. What's the best thing we can do? I'll probably go on vacation for 6 months, right? And then come back, and then the models have improved. We had this with the release of the GPT-4.1 model. We plugged it in at the next day, which is also, I think, a thing that we can do at Lucanet, right? There's a new model released, and we can, at R&D, we can really use it on the next day and try it out with our tools. And also, of course, we have developed our tools in a way that we can switch out the model without a lot of work. And this 4.1 update as opposed to what did we use before 4.0, I think, was 20% increase in accuracy just by switching out the model, right? And that's just mind-blowing. And I think we are starting thinking of use cases that are not possible right now, but we are certain, looking at the development of the last 18 months, that they will be possible at least a year from now, right? And that's quite a way to work that we're not used to, right? Like, usually we find the way that's possible now, but now we can think about things that are not yet possible, but might be possible in the future, right?
To me, it sometimes reminds me of COVID times, where we couldn't imagine the speed of spreading a virus and how exponentially the growth will be. Yeah. And in that sense, it feels kind of similar, that it's really tough to imagine this speed and the velocity of development of these models. And hence, it's challenging to anticipate what these use cases can be in the very future. And I think when I'm talking to companies, this is also what they're struggling with a lot, trying to understand, is it just a trend or a hype that maybe comes, or maybe it fails? Or is it something we can't miss out on? So that's what we hear a lot from companies, as they're trying to find their way, especially considering they have their day-to-day jobs. They can't follow all the news all the time. So to provide them with some kind of insights into how the developments are unfolding, I think that's what we try to do for them as a partner, to give them the headspace. We got your back covered, and we'll think about how AI can be utilized in the realm of finance. And with that, I think, come also some challenges, and there are valid concerns around AI as well, which it's also important to address and to understand what are the limitations. You mentioned the use cases where AI can be applied, and I think it's important also for finance teams to, at least to some degree, understand how these models work, how the technology works. Very similar to how finance teams have data scientists to analyze their data, how they have controllers who are very aware of how their ERP system is constructed. And the same will hold true for AI solutions, I feel. And what we experience a lot, I think, in our solutions is also that the context of what is provided to a model is very important for it to work properly.
Yeah, definitely. And also the models all work a little bit differently, right? So you can use one model for one task and one model works better for another task. But I think it's not only the models that develop at breakneck speed, right? It's also everything around it. For example, the infrastructure, right? With this XBRL tagger agent, it's like because you work with a whole annual report, that's a lot of context, right? What you just said. But then this also needs a lot of model resources, and every company in the world just wants resources working with these models, but there's only a limited amount of computing power, but also a limited amount of electricity to go around. And we're actually running sometimes into like the limitations of not our infrastructure, but the infrastructure for Microsoft, for example, right? So we're really like working on the cutting edge here, which we feel sometimes as well. For Microsoft, you expect like I can just get more if I want more, right? But that's not the case because there is not more, right? It's also a new way for us to experience. And also technologies around, for example, MCP. It's for those who don't know, it's short for Model Context Protocol. It's sort of an API for large language models, right? So you can create different tools that the AI can interact with. The real crucial point is that the AI understands themselves which tool to use in what, from context, right? In what circumstances. And this is also a recent development. I know 6 months ago it was released for the first time or something, and now it's industry standard, like all the large language models support it. And these MCP tools, they are being released also at a relentless pace, right? Of course, you can use it for productivity, working with your issue tracking tools, working with Microsoft Office and so on. But you can also leverage it like to interact with tools. So for example, I will also show that I think later at some point, but we can interact with the XBRL tagger through large language models using these tools, right? You can say, hey, on page 161, please take the disclosure of goodwill, right? And then it will use the tagger, actually. It will use the tool, jump to this page and tag it, right? So this way of interacting with external tools, but also external information is something that is coming on top, really. But it's really enabling these models to do amazing things, right? You can use one MCP and transfer information from one MCP to the next one, for example. And the models really understand what's happening. And that's also, for me, I'm often surprised how well they understand what I want, right? If I talk to my developers, they sometimes struggle with understanding what I want, which is probably more my fault than their fault. But the LLMs, they do understand what I want. And I often, with one sentence, get back something that I really want. Even if the models would stop developing today, we still have 5 to 10 years of catching up to do with what we already have. And they don't stop, right? I think we've conveyed that for us, this is not a hype, right? This is the future. And I'm 100% convinced that this is the future. It's a new paradigm of software, really, right? There have been a few paradigm shifts like in the digital environments already, but this is something else, right? This will change everything. But let's talk a little bit about, there's different types of interacting with AI. We mentioned a few already, right? That are also valid for different use cases, right? There's not one way to go for everything. So for example, you are responsible for the Copilot in the Lucanet platform. Maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think it's when we think about finance teams but also the individuals within these teams, they probably got in contact with AI via ChatGPT initially. And you have this mode of interaction, which is you put in some text, you get some text out. And this is what we would consider as co-pilots, which help you by receiving some kind of question or prompt from you as a controller or accountant to then answer directly based on the knowledge they already have available, or receive some information that's available within one of our solutions to basically make you more efficient by digging up the data so that you don't have to search for it. So that's, I think, is one area where large language models and AI can help a lot by just supporting you by providing text back. And you mentioned the Model Context Protocol, which allows us to go even a bit further, I think, where AI is not only giving you some information back, but it executes something for you. And I think this is really where we see a lot of efficiency gains and productivity gains for finance teams, where the AI is doing some of the very repetitive tasks. You mentioned it in the very beginning, where AI is doing part of the monthly closing or annual closing process, which are not liked a lot by a lot of accountants, but you are obliged to do it. And if AI can support finance teams there, that's extremely handy. So these are what we would call agents. And an AI that receives some input from you could also be a text and then goes on to execute some tasks within our solutions. It acquires additional context, meaning it receives some data from one solution and then writes a report for you in the part of the annual report you want to draft. So this is really the next level. And I think when we think about productivity gains, this is where we see a lot of gains are going to be created there. And I think it's one concern a lot of people have when it comes to AI, will it replace me or not? And I think it's there to replace workload or move away workload rather than workforce, to ultimately make the life of people a bit easier. And reclosing in a not stressful way would be something that's truly revolutionary, I think, for accounting. So yeah, being at the forefront of developing these kind of things, I think, is very exciting and really awesome to see, actually.
What do you think about, like, if we talk about agents that, you give them a task, they go away, they do the work, and then they come back, right? Especially in finance, if we think about, we have to submit our report to the regulators, they will check it, maybe to the auditors, then they come back to us and ask us questions about these reports. Why is this, for example, as I'm coming from XBRL, why is this tagged with this tag, right? How are we managing this now? And at what point is it actually possible that the regulator accepts this as an explanation, right? That you say, yeah, but the AI decided this, right? Because right now, the accountability is still with everyone in the accounting departments, right? So they need to understand what the AI is doing. Yeah. We're talking about human in the loop. How would you see that as part of the Lucanet platform for it?
Yeah, it's a very fair point. I always recommend to think about AI like a colleague, actually. And imagine you have a colleague, you hand them a task to write something that will be audited. What would you do with that colleague where you are not 100% certain about the reliability? You would double check the work. You're happy that they are doing it and that you don't have to do all the work, but you double check. The same will hold true with AI, that it goes off, maybe takes a couple of minutes instead of hours or days to do the task and come back with a result and says, this is what I've done. And then you can double check the work. I think that's very important, especially in the realm of finance, where we need to have that reliability and ultimately the transparency so that I can truly double check the work. What you just mentioned, to keep the human in the loop, and that's what we are trying to do a lot as well, to utilize AI, but then present the results in a consumable way to a human so that they can double check the work. So this is very important on that particular piece. And coming back to your question, will a regulator accept that this is AI generated? I don't think so. Ultimately, accountable is still a human, at least at the current stage. But if you've double-checked the work, it was done by an AI, but you're still saying, I'm responsible and accountable for that, and I've checked it, and it's okay. No auditor would mind how it was ultimately created. Likewise, how they don't care about who did the consolidation. Was it a junior accountant or the senior group accountant? They don't mind. They just check the numbers, whether it's fine. So I think definitely that's the direction we are seeing and we are going towards. And likewise, these auditors will use AI to audit at some point. So I think generally as an industry, we are moving towards a world where the structure of finance teams and also auditing companies are changing, and a finance team does not only consist of humans, but also AI agents would be part of the team. Again, as I mentioned earlier, interacting with a colleague.
Yeah. And if we think about this review system, so I'm getting asked by a lot of our clients today, actually, when they accept the tag, for example, when they accept the change that the AI does or reject the change, will, in our software at least, will that feed back into the models so that we basically train them?
Yeah, it's a very important point. As mentioned earlier, there's a lot of concerns around AI, which are very valid, and it's a new technology, and we are very sensitive to data security in finance. So we are very aware of that we can't use customer data for training models, or that this goes public in some kind of way or is available to other users of a model, God forbid. So definitely we are already included in the infrastructure methods that are preventing that data is leaking in some kind of way. Even for us internally in our analysis tools, we are masking data from customers. So this is definitely something we have to keep in mind when developing AI products and solutions, that trust is still the foundation for everything, and especially in finance, that's very important. And yeah, I think that leads a bit to the point of, yes, AI is great, there are efficiency gains to be had, but what would you think are still the limitations or risks associated with AI?
Basically what you said, right? Like we need to make certain that the data does not leak. That is, of course, in our platform, of course, that does not leak from one client to the next, that it does not leak from the client to us, that should also not happen. But also from if you think about the GDPR, it's important that the data is only being processed in the region, for example, where also the client sits, right? If I'm a German company, I want to use AI services that are also in Germany, right? And this is something that you will work on as head of product AI, right? To make this actually possible. If we look at limitations from my XBRL point of view, then I think the context window is something that we still have to work with. So AIs do have something called a context window limitation, that they only can work with a certain amount of data at a time, right? So if you start one chat with ChatGPT, for example, then you can talk with it about a certain topic. If you start the next chat, it will have forgotten everything you say. That's not true for the app anymore because it actually has some memory. But for most large language model, that is the case. It does not have transient memory from your prior conversations, and you can also not put in as much amount as you want of information that you want. For example, if you want to analyze annual reports with large language models, and it's really a large annual report they can have up to 1,000 pages, right? And for example, we use Claude internally, right? If I upload a PDF with 1,000 pages to Claude, it will say, sorry, I cannot process this at all, right? And also the more information you have at the same time the model working on, the less accurate it gets. Of course, if you upload an annual report, it will probably you ask it, what is the revenue? It will probably get that right. But if you ask it to calculate the EBITDA, then sometimes it just makes up some numbers that are not available in the report, right? I had that with some example. It just made up the values for depreciation and amortization, and then it presented me an EBITDA that was not true, right? This is really a limitation that we have to work around in a lot of places. And that's again where MCP helps a lot, because now, at least when we talk about XBRL, which makes these annual reports machine readable, so you can actually have this granular information. You can ask what is the revenue, and then it will exactly know where the revenue is in the report, and will have some additional information about what period is this in, what unit, and so on, right? And you can feed this granular information into the LLM. And then you can actually not only analyze one annual report, you can analyze a whole bunch of annual reports and compare them, right? So we have these context window limitations, but there's ways to work around this with this new technologies, but also if we are creative in developing our solutions, really, right? But that's definitely one limitations that we currently are working on.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. And I think what's relevant for finance teams to understand is how that context works. And especially in the beginning, when you try to educate yourself on AI and large language models, you get a lot of content online on how to structure your prompt, what you should put in there, what should you not put in there. And I think there's too little attention paid to what other context do you provide to a large language model, especially when you are doing a more complex task, where you somewhat cautiously have to decide which content to put in there and which you should not put in there. So not to confuse the models or basically go past the context windows. That being said, I'm pretty confident that we'll see this context window growing and smarter ways of extending that and utilizing that in a different way.
If we take all of this into account, and it's at the speed this all is developing. It's hard to imagine 2 years from now, actually, or 5 years from now. But if we think about the Lucanet CFO solution platform, let's say in 10 years, because that's science fiction, right? But with what we know now and what's possible, what could you imagine the platform to be in 10 years?
I think it's really hard to anticipate, obviously, but there are no limits to the creativity. It could be that the whole software for all jobs to be done in the office of the CFO is just one chat interface, maybe. Maybe it's not even a chat interface. Rather, you talk to it via voice, or you link it to your brain. Who knows? So definitely that's something that could become a reality. And whether it will be like that or not, I think it doesn't matter too much when we look at the details. But I think it gets across this idea of we are experiencing a fundamental shift in the ways of working in finance, which inherently never has been the most innovative department in an organization. But with this new technology available, that will definitely be the case. And we talked earlier about hype or trend. And I think as a finance organization, it's not a matter of if you work with AI or not. It's more a question of how quickly can you bring it into your processes. And you simply cannot afford as a finance organization to bet on this will just vanish or not work out, because then you are so far behind, so you cannot follow up then.
Yeah, definitely. I think on the way to whatever there will be in 10 years, the most important thing, and we talked about it, is to get everybody on board, right? Is it via review, via education, via review mechanisms? Everybody needs to be taken on board where they are. We are at the forefront. Of course, there's people who are literally at the forefront, but I think from the consumer side, we are at the forefront of it. Our customers maybe not yet, so we need to get them on board. And then over time, we can probably automate more and more and more on our solution platform. Yeah. But I think also from solution-wise, it will be a journey, right? There will be these review processes in the beginning, and then they will probably become less and less. And also our clients, if they build trust with this application, maybe at some point they will say, yes, accept everything, right? Like I do sometimes in Cursor, for example. But it's definitely a journey for everyone involved, and who knows what's coming in 5 years, right?
Yeah, we'll definitely keep the audience updated, I think.
Definitely. But as you said, right, one thing is certain, really, this is a train that you cannot miss. We cannot miss it. Our clients cannot miss it. Also, probably in your private life, you should not miss it. AI is here to stay. I think Kevin said last year, it's overhyped, maybe overhyped in the short term. I even don't believe that, to be honest. But in the long term, it will probably deliver on all the promises that they are making, that everybody's making right now. All right. Is there anything else that's on your heart talking about AI?
Yeah, I think for a lot of finance teams, it's just relevant to understand where to start. And I think it's less a matter of where to start, but just get started. Think about small use cases, something small steps you can do initially just to get into it and the hang of it. So I think this is quite relevant to get started. And with that being said, I think we can end this session. Very much appreciated the time. I think it was really enjoyable to have a chat on AI and finance. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you for being here. And with this, we'll conclude this episode of Finance in Flow.
This episode is brought to you by Lucanet, the CFO solution platform for future-ready finance leaders. Reimagine the way your finance team works with fully integrated workflows and enterprise-grade solutions for all your jobs to be done. From planning and consolidation to reporting, Lucanet connects people, data, and plans into a single source of truth, helping you deliver insights faster and with less complexity. Trusted by leading brands like Allianz, Bayer, Volkswagen, and Trivago, Lucanet empowers finance teams around the world to scale smarter. Learn more at lucanet.com.